This is Epicurus. He was one of the most influential philosophers to ever live, even though not that many people have heard of him. His philosophy is called Epicurianism, but it is nothing like the popular, but inaccurate image of someone who enjoys pleasure so much they can't stop eating cheese and drinking wine. Epicurus didn't believe that pleasure was the highest good or even that it should be the main goal in life. And according to Epicurus, there are four bodily needs like hunger and thirst which he considered the most important because they directly affect our survival, mental states like fear and anger, which can be very powerful but are often unnecessary. External events such as losing someone we love or getting old and weak. And our judgments about these things which cause our emotions and shape our experience of reality. And since our opinions are under our control, we don't actually have to suffer from anything. There are some desires that are worth pursuing because they lead to greater happiness, freedom and self-sufficiency. On the surface, this desire doesn't seem very useful. The first desire comes from insecurity and fear and leads to more suffering and dependence. The second desire comes from curiosity and passion and leads to more happiness and freedom. Thank you for watching. Epicurus would say that the first desire is a natural but not necessary part of human existence. We all have needs and fears that drive us to seek external things that seem to satisfy them. But the second desire is a product of our choices and habits that shape our character and our values. After all, how will learning an instrument help him in his daily life, in cultivating the ones that make us better and stronger and in overcoming the ones that make us weaker and more miserable? Epicurus taught us that the chief task in life is to separate things into two buckets, the things that are in our control and the things that are not. When we put too much effort into controlling the things that are not in our control, we become anxious and stressed. When we take too little effort to control the things that are in our control, we become lazy and careless. Our duty as human beings is to find the sweet spot between these two extremes, to focus on what we can influence and let go of what we can't. But if we dig deeper, we'll see that this desire stems from a love of music, from a passion for learning, from a desire for self-expression. And if we pursue this desire, we'll find that it brings us joy and relaxation, that it makes us more creative and disciplined, that it gives us a hobby and a social life. And there are others that are harmful and should be avoided. Let's look at some examples. A young man might want to become famous and wealthy. On the surface, this desire seems harmless. After all, what's wrong with wanting to be successful? But if we dig deeper, we'll see that this desire stems from a need for external validation, from a fear of being ignored or forgotten, from a worrying that we are not good enough. And if we pursue this desire, we'll find that it doesn't satisfy us for long because we will always want more fame and more wealth. It will also make us more dependent on other people's opinions and more vulnerable to their whims. And finally, it will distract us from what really matters in life, like our relationships, our health, our personal growth. We choose to. That's why he said that pleasure is not the absence of pain, but the absence of desire. Because desire is what makes us crave for certain things and resent the things we don't have. Desire is what makes us unhappy with what we have now and unsatisfied with what we can get. Desire is what makes us feel deprived and discontent. And so Epicurus taught us to question every desire we have and ask ourselves whether it is really worth it, whether it will bring us lasting happiness or just momentary pleasure, whether it will make us more or less free, whether it will help us live a better life or drag us down to the mud. Instead, he defined pleasure as the absence of pain. So it's more about achieving a state of calm and tranquility than having lots of fun. And he thought that this state could only be achieved by giving up some pleasures, specifically the ones that lead to excess, which in turn leads to pain. For example, if you eat too much food, you will eventually feel sick and tired, so then pleasure turns into pain. This is why Epicurus advised his followers to avoid extremes in all things. Too much sex leads to lust, which causes pain. For example, if we see a wild animal running towards us, we might feel scared, but that's because we judge that animal to be dangerous and ourselves to be vulnerable. If we could somehow remove those judgments and see that animal as just another creature trying to survive, perhaps we wouldn't feel threatened. Or when someone we love dies, we might feel devastated, but that is because we judge that person to be irreplaceable and ourselves to be incapable of going on without them. If we could accept death as a natural part of life and realize that we will never stop experiencing new joys and meeting new people, perhaps we wouldn't feel so heartbroken. Too much money leads to greed, which also causes pain. Too much anything leads to some form of pain. Only when we practice moderation and find the middle ground can we achieve pleasure. But it's not just about avoiding pain. In order to do that, we need to understand what causes it. The key to avoiding pain, therefore, is to take control of our judgments and learn how to deal with whatever life throws at us. In other words, according to Epicurus, most of the things that cause us pain are not things themselves, but our opinions about them. Desires can be divided into two categories based on these criteria. On the other hand, a young man might also want to learn how to play the piano. So you see, it's not the desires themselves that are good or bad, but the reasons behind them and the consequences that follow from them. And here is where the true art of living lies, in knowing which desires to follow and which to resist. And that's why he said that the key to happiness is not to have everything we want, but to want what we have.